The moment they said, "You're fired," the room didn't just react, it celebrated. A few people actually laughed. One guy at the back clapped like it was some kind of corporate comedy show. And me? I just stood there in the center of a glass-walled boardroom while 12 executives looked at me like I was already gone. Like I didn't matter. Like I was disposable. Security was already moving toward me before I even spoke. Not because I resisted, but because they wanted the moment to feel final, clean, public, humiliating. And that's when I realized something important. They weren't firing me because I failed. They were firing me because they thought I couldn't fight back. My name is Adrian Cole. And 10 minutes ago, I was still the quiet analyst in this company. At least, that's what they believed. What they didn't know was that I had been in this building longer than most of them. Longer than some of them had even held their positions. And none of them knew who I really was. The meeting started like any other corporate disaster waiting to happen. Long table, overpriced coffee, projectors showing meaningless charts nobody actually understood, and executives pretending they weren't already planning someone's downfall. That someone was me. Even before I sat down, I could feel it. The tone, the glances, the forced politeness that only exists right before a public execution. Marcus Delaney, the COO, leaned forward first. He didn't even open a file. He didn't need to. This wasn't about performance. It was about control. "You've been with the company for what, 2 years now?" he asked. I nodded once. "Correct." A few faint smiles appeared around the table. Like they already knew where this was going. Like they had rehearsed it. Marcus leaned back. "You've had time to integrate, understand systems, contribute, but frankly, there's been no measurable impact." That word impact was intentional. Corporate language, for we've already decided your fate. A woman on the left side of the table, Denise from HR, slid a folder forward without looking at me. Termination paperwork. Pre-printed. Pre-signed. Pre-decided. I didn't touch it. Not yet. Because I was still watching them. Studying them. The way predators relax right before they strike. Denise spoke next. "We've reviewed your performance metrics, your peer feedback, and your overall alignment with company goals." She paused slightly. A rehearsed pause. "And unfortunately, we don't see a future for you here." That's when the first laugh came. Quiet, from someone near the far end of the table. Not loud enough to be noticed officially, but loud enough to be intended. I nodded slowly. "Interesting," I said. Marcus tilted his head slightly. "Interesting?" I looked around the room. Every face watching me. Every expression carefully neutral, except it wasn't neutral. It was entertained. "Yes," I said calmly. "Interesting that you've already decided everything before I even got here." Denise gave a small smile. "That's how corporate decisions work." That line got another laugh. This time louder. Marcus finally leaned forward again. "Adrian, let's not make this difficult. You're being offered a clean exit." Clean exit. That phrase always makes me laugh now. Because there is nothing clean about being erased in front of people who enjoy it. I looked at the document finally. Termination agreement, severance clause, non-disclosure conditions, standard language. Except it wasn't standard for me. Because I knew exactly what they were trying to do. Erase access, control narrative, remove influence quietly. I pushed the folder back slightly. "I'm curious," I said. Marcus sighed. "Go ahead." "Who approved this?" A brief silence. Then Denise answered quickly. "Executive board consensus." I nodded slowly. "And who sits on that board?" Marcus smiled slightly. "We do." That answer was supposed to end the conversation. Instead, it started something else. Because now I knew something important. They didn't just think I was irrelevant. They thought they were the company. I leaned back in my chair slightly. No emotion. No resistance. Just observation. That confused them more than anger would have. Marcus noticed it immediately. "You're taking this very calmly," he said. I shrugged slightly. "What would you prefer?" That hit a nerve. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Denise crossed her arms. "This isn't personal, Adrian. It's structural." That word again. Structural. Corporate language for you were never meant to matter. Marcus stood slightly now. "We need someone who fits the direction we're moving in." I nodded. "And what direction is that?" He paused. That pause mattered. because even he didn't know how honest he could be in front of everyone. Finally, he said it. Leadership that aligns with scale, growth, and investor confidence. Translation: people who don't question authority. People who don't ask who actually owns the room. I stood up slowly. Not aggressively, not dramatically, just enough to shift the energy in the room. Immediately, security at the door adjusted. 2 guards, both watching me now. Marcus raised a hand slightly. Let's keep this professional. I smiled faintly. I am. That wasn't sarcasm. It was truth. Because what I was doing wasn't emotional. It was controlled, measured, timed. Denise slid the termination document forward again. Sign it and we can all move on. I looked at it, then looked at her. Move on to what? She blinked. Excuse me? I leaned slightly forward. After I sign this, what happens next? Marcus answered this time. We continue operations without disruption. I nodded. So nothing changes for you. A pause, and everything changes for me. That was the moment I saw it. Not fear, not guilt, just entitlement. The belief that I had no leverage in this room, that I was just another line item being removed. I picked up the pen, and for a moment, I just held it, watching them watch me, waiting for submission, waiting for compliance, waiting for the moment they win publicly. Denise smiled slightly. That's the right decision, but I didn't sign yet. Instead, I said something that made the room shift again. I've been curious about something for a while now. Marcus sighed. Adrian. No, I interrupted calmly. Let me finish. Silence again. I looked at each of them, one by one, and I just want to understand something clearly. I tapped the pen lightly against the table. If I'm so irrelevant, a pause. Why does my employee file require board-level approval for termination? The room went still. Not quieter. Still, because that wasn't a normal question. That was a system question. Marcus's expression changed slightly. Denise stopped smiling. Someone at the far end shifted in their seat. That's standard policy, Marcus said quickly. I nodded. For analysts? A pause. Silence stretched, because there was no answer that made sense. I placed the pen down and leaned back again. You know what's interesting? I said softly. Marcus narrowed his eyes. What? I looked at the glass walls of the boardroom, the city outside, the building they all thought they controlled. Then I looked back at them. This room feels very confident for people who don't actually know who they work for. That landed differently. Not loud, not aggressive, but precise. Denise frowned. I think you're confusing yourself with importance you don't have. That was supposed to end it, but I just nodded. That's possible. A pause. Or maybe I'm the only one in this room who knows exactly how important I am. That was when Marcus finally lost patience. He stood fully now. This is over. Security will escort you out. 2 guards immediately stepped forward. And that's when I said it. Calm, quiet, almost casual. Before you do that, I think you should check the internal system. Marcus frowned. What system? I smiled slightly. The ownership registry. Silence. Denise laughed nervously. Why would we do that? I looked at her. Because you just fired someone without knowing what position they actually hold in this company. That sentence didn't land immediately. But it would. Marcus gestured to the guards. Remove him. They stepped closer. 1 on each side, hands ready. And then, my phone vibrated in my pocket. Once, then again. A message preview flashed on the screen. From an unknown internal contact. Just 4 words. Access is now live. I looked up at Marcus, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was the one being removed. The guard's hands were inches from my arms. Not aggressive yet. Professional. Controlled. Like they were removing a malfunctioning object from a meeting room. Marcus didn't even look at me anymore. He was already done with me. Denise had turned slightly toward the exit, like this entire moment was beneath her attention span. And the rest of the board? They were already mentally moving on. That was the mistake. Because nothing in that room was over. It had just started reacting. My phone buzzed again. One more message. Same sender. Ownership verification broadcast initiated. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just waited. Because once that system went live, there was no going back. Not for them. Marcus sighed impatiently. This is pathetic, he said. You think you can delay this with theatrics? I finally looked at him directly. I'm not delaying anything. A pause. I'm letting it arrive. That line confused him for half a second. That half second mattered. One of the guards grabbed my arm. Firm now. Final step. And at that exact moment, every screen in the boardroom flickered. The projector froze mid-slide. The glass wall reflections distorted slightly, and every laptop on the table chimed at the same time. A system-wide alert. Not local. Not departmental. Corporate-wide. Denise frowned immediately. What is that? She asked. No one answered her. Because no one knew. Marcus stepped forward slightly. I'd issue, he said quickly. Ignore it. But the alert didn't go away. It expanded. On every screen in the room, a single line appeared. Ownership structure update, live authentication in progress. The guards hesitated, not because they understood it, but because systems like that don't just appear during firings. I slowly pulled my arm back from the guard's grip, and this time, he let go. Not because I told him to, but because something in the room had changed. Something invisible, but undeniable. Marcus noticed it too. His expression tightened slightly. What did you do? He asked sharply. I didn't answer. Because I didn't need to. The system was answering for me. Denise stepped closer to a screen. Why is this showing ownership architecture? Her voice wasn't confident anymore. It was confused. And confusion spreads faster than authority collapses. Marcus snapped. Someone shut it down. He turned toward IT through his phone. But nothing responded. Not because it was broken. Because it was locked. I finally spoke again. You might want to sit down. Marcus looked at me like I was insane. This is your last warning. I nodded slightly. No, I said, this is yours. The first document appeared on screen. Clean. Official. Stamped. Then another. Then another. Like pages being pulled out of a locked vault in real time. Denise's face changed. I don't understand. These are internal governance files. Marcus stepped closer. What governance files? Then he saw it. The header. Primary ownership authorization signatory. A. Cole. Silence hit the room instantly. Not quiet. Silence. The kind that removes air from lungs. Marcus stared at the screen. Then at me. Then back at the screen again. That's not possible, he said. But his voice was lower now. Less certain. Denise shook her head. No, this must be a breach. But she stopped mid-sentence. Because more documents appeared. Layered structures. Share distribution. Voting rights. Final authority indexes. And at the top of every page, my name. Again, and again, and again. One of the board members stood up abruptly. This is fake, he said loudly. But no one agreed with him. Not because they believed me, but because the system itself wasn't denying it. Marcus turned sharply toward IT again. Terminate the feed. But the reply came back instantly. From a system channel. Access level. Owner locked override impossible. That's when his face changed. Not fear yet, but recognition. I watched him carefully. Because now the shift was happening. Not in me, in them. Denise whispered, Marcus, what is this? But he didn't answer her. Because he was reading faster now, scrolling through internal structures, looking for an explanation that would save him. I stepped forward slightly. You've been operating under delegated authority, I said calmly. Marcus looked up at me sharply. Delegated from who? I nodded toward the screen. From me. That word landed like a physical impact. Not because it was loud, but because it contradicted everything they believed about reality. Marcus shook his head. No, you're an employee. I tilted my head slightly. According to what? Silence. Denise grabbed the edge of the table. This is impossible. Ownership filings require regulatory disclosure. I nodded. They were filed? Another pause. Privately structured holding entity. That's when I saw her face change. Because she understood just enough to realize she didn't understand enough. Marcus took a step closer to me. Lower voice now. This is a manipulation layer. You're not the owner. I met his eyes. You're right about one thing. A pause. I wasn't your employee in the way you thought. The room began shifting now. People whispering, standing, looking between screens and each other. The authority structure they had trusted was dissolving in real time. One board member slammed his hand on the table. This is sabotage. But even he didn't sound sure anymore. And then the second system alert appeared. Bigger, louder. On every screen, board resolution override all current executive decisions under review. Marcus froze. For the first time, fully frozen. Denise turned to him. What does that mean? But he didn't answer. Because he was finally realizing the truth. They weren't in control of the system. They were just operating inside it. I walked slowly toward the head of the table. Not rushed. Not aggressive. Just present. And for the first time, no one stopped me. Not the guards. Not the executives. No one. Marcus finally spoke again. His voice quieter now. What are you? I stopped, looked at him, and said, I'm the person you removed from the system without checking who built it. That hit harder than anything else. Because now it wasn't theory. It was structure. Denise whispered, we need legal confirmation this could be spoofed. But then, her laptop auto-opened a secure file. Without her input, and displayed. Final authority. A. Co-executive continuity owner. Her hand froze on the keyboard. Slowly, she looked at me, like seeing me for the first time. Marcus stepped back slightly. No, he muttered. But it wasn't denial anymore. It was resistance to acceptance. I finally spoke clearly. You didn't fire an analyst today. Pause. You triggered a governance lockout against the majority shareholder. Silence again, but heavier now. Permanent. One of the guards stepped back from me completely. Another lowered his hand. They weren't acting anymore. They were waiting. Because authority had shifted. Marcus looked around the room, then at me. His voice cracked slightly when he spoke. How long have you had this structure? I didn't hesitate. Long enough for you to forget to ask. That's when the final system change hit. Doors unlocked automatically. Security alerts stopped. And every screen displayed one final line. Executive control, transfer initiated. Denise whispered, this can't be happening. But it was. Already happening. Marcus took one step back. Then another. And for the first time since this began, he wasn't managing the room anymore. He was reacting to it. And I looked at all of them. Every executive. Every decision maker. Every person who laughed 10 minutes ago. And I said quietly, you can still sit down, or you can wait until the system decides for you. As the boardroom went silent again, Marcus finally whispered, if you're the owner, then why were you here as an employee? And I smiled slightly, because that was the question that would end everything they thought they knew. And I said, because I needed to know who would betray the company before I ever showed them who owned it. The silence in the boardroom didn't feel normal anymore. It felt structural, like the entire room had been placed inside a system that was waiting for instructions to finish loading. Marcus stood near the center of the table, frozen in a way I had never seen before. Not fear yet. Something worse. Realization trying to catch up with denial. Denise still had her hand on the edge of her laptop, but she wasn't typing anymore. No one was. Because every screen in the room had already made the decision for them. Marcus finally spoke again. If you're the owner, he said slowly, carefully, then why were you here as an employee? That question hung in the air like a last attempt to restore logic, to restore hierarchy, to restore the version of reality they preferred. I looked at him for a moment, not rushed, not emotional, just letting him sit inside his own question. Then I answered, because I don't trust people who only behave correctly when they know who's watching. That landed differently. The room didn't react immediately, because it wasn't a threat. It was an explanation, and explanations are more dangerous than threats in rooms like this. I walked slowly to the head of the table, not because I needed dominance, but because I already had it. Every step echoed slightly against the polished floor, and no one stopped me. Not the guards, not the executives, not Marcus, because authority had already shifted out of their hands. They just hadn't fully accepted it yet. I placed my hand on the table, calm, centered, and said quietly, "Pull up the executive control panel." Denise blinked. "What?" I didn't look at her. "Do it." Something in my tone changed the air. Not louder, not aggressive, final. Her fingers moved slowly on the keyboard, hesitant, like the system might reject her entirely. But instead, it responded. Immediately. A central dashboard opened on every screen in the room. Executive control matrix. And at the top, primary authority, A, Cole. Marcus stepped forward quickly. "That's a layered identity structure," he said immediately. "It's a proxy system." But he stopped mid-sentence, because even he didn't believe that anymore. Denise looked at the screen again. Her voice lowered. "If this is real, then every decision we've made." She didn't finish. She didn't need to, because the implication was already spreading through the room. I turned slightly toward the board members. "You didn't just fire an employee," I said calmly. "You attempted to remove voting authority from the controlling entity of this company." A pause. "And did it publicly." That part mattered. Public mistakes are the hardest to reverse. One of the board members stood up abruptly. "This is illegal. There's no disclosure of you as controlling owner in any of our filings." I nodded. "Correct?" Silence. Then I added, "Because you never read the full structure." Marcus turned sharply toward me. "What structure?" I finally looked at him directly. "The one designed to identify who would act without understanding authority first." That hit him. Not emotionally. Logically, because Marcus understood systems. And now he was realizing he had been inside one he didn't design. Denise whispered, "Marcus, what did we do?" For the first time, he didn't answer immediately, because he didn't know how. I walked slowly toward the center of the table again. And this time, no one reacted like I was an employee. They reacted like I was the system itself. I pressed a button on the control panel. Instantly, every screen changed. A list of names appeared. Executive roster, board members, department heads, voting weights, access levels, and next to each name, a status indicator, some green, some yellow, some red. Marcus stared at it. "This is internal governance mapping." I nodded. "Yes." A pause. "And it's been running for 18 months. That's when his expression shifted again, because now he was doing the math. Not emotionally. Structurally. Denise stepped closer. 18 months. You've been tracking executive behavior?" I looked at her. "I've been tracking decision patterns." That distinction mattered. Marcus took a slow step back. "No, this is entrapment logic." I shook my head slightly. "No." A pause. "This is observation." One of the board members pointed at the screen. "Why is my name in red?" I glanced at it, then back at him. "Because you voted on 3 structural decisions without reading any supporting documentation." Silence. He blinked. "That's normal corporate procedure." I nodded. "And that's the problem." The room shifted again, because now they were realizing something deeper. This wasn't about firing me. It was about exposure of behavior. Denise spoke quietly now. "So what happens now?" I turned slightly toward her. "That depends." A pause. "On whether you still believe you were in control before this moment." No one answered, because the answer had already been taken from them. Marcus finally spoke again. "If you're in control, why not just shut us down?" That was the real question. Not legal, not technical, philosophical. I looked at him for a long moment, then said, "Because I didn't build this company to collapse." A pause. "I built it to correct itself." That changed something in the room. Not fear. Understanding. I tapped the table once, and the system responded again. Executive action review initiated. Denise's screen flickered. "Wait, what is that?" I answered calmly. "Final governance assessment." Marcus stepped forward sharply. "You can't just override a board decision retroactively." I nodded. "I can when the board decision violates its own founding structure." That stopped him, because he knew corporate law, and he knew what that meant. The system began listing decisions, terminations, approvals, budget reallocations, personnel removals, including mine. Each one was flagged. Reviewed. Reclassified. Then a new message appeared. Unauthorized execution detected initiating role reversal. The room went completely still again. One of the guards near the door slowly lowered his radio. Another stepped back entirely, because now even security understood the hierarchy had changed. Marcus looked around the room, and for the first time, he wasn't the one everyone looked to. They were looking at me. Denise finally whispered, "What does role reversal mean?" I answered without hesitation. "It means every decision you made under invalid authority is now subject to immediate correction." Silence. Then panic started forming. Not loud, controlled. Corporate panic. The worst kind. Marcus took a step closer to me. Lowered voice. "This doesn't have to escalate further." I looked at him. It already has. And then the final system alert appeared. Larger. Centered. Unavoidable. Executive control transfer. Pending final confirmation. Denise looked at me. Confirmation of what? I met her eyes. Whether I take control publicly? That sentence changed everything. Because until now, I had been revealing structure, not activating authority. Marcus realized it too. His voice dropped. "If you confirm that, we're removed." I nodded slightly. Yes. Silence again. But different now. Heavier. Final stage silence. I looked around the table one last time. At the people who laughed, who signed, who decided, who assumed. Then I said quietly, "You didn't just fire me in public." A pause. "You demonstrated who in this company acts without understanding consequences." And I pressed the final command. The screens went white for half a second, then returned with a single line. "Authority transfer complete A. Cole confirmed as active controlling owner." Marcus didn't speak. He just stared at it. Like if he didn't acknowledge it, it might disappear. Denise slowly sat down. Not out of respect, out of realization. Security at the door stepped back fully now. No orders. No movement. Just waiting. And I finally spoke to the entire room. Calm. Clear. Final. Meeting is over. A pause. "And so is the version of this company you thought you were running." Marcus looked at me one last time. No anger anymore. Just defeat layered with understanding. "What happens to us?" I paused, then answered honestly. "That depends on what kind of company you want to work in going forward." And for the first time in the entire room, no one laughed. No one interrupted. No one argued. Because they finally understood the truth. They didn't fire an employee. They revealed the owner. As I turned toward the glass wall overlooking the city, I added one last line. "This company doesn't punish mistakes." A pause. "It corrects them." And behind me, the boardroom quietly began rewriting itself.